What's the worst example of bad parenting you've ever seen? At a movie theater, sitting in the 4th or 5th row with friends. This was a rated R movie. Two kids maybe 4 and 7-year-old are in the audience. They start playing and running back and forth at the front of the theater. The 4-year-old falls and starts to cry. The parent doesn't bother to get up. My friend finally went to console the child after a few minutes. The mother never bothered to get up. I have a friend who's always had trouble sleeping. When she was young and didn't want to go to bed, her mother would tell her she'd die if she didn't go to sleep. So she'd desperately try to go to sleep, but would be kept awake by her fear of not falling asleep. Literally 3 days ago I was at a cash point at around 10:30 p.m. when some woman pulls up beside me in her 3-door Vauxhall Corsa in the pissing down rain, sends her kid, who couldn't have been older than 9, who was wearing a bathrobe, running into the chip shop to get a bag of chips. He came back to the car without any and said he didn't have the right amount of money, and she hurled all sorts of abuse. I've given you the right fucking amount. Now fuck off back into the shop and get the fucking food. Then a few minutes later he comes back to the car, soaking wet, with a bag of food, and she starts yelling that he better have gotten the fucking order right because it doesn't fucking look right. And she yells at him to get in the car and she just speeds off. Standing outside a supermarket a couple of years back, a woman walks out, toddler in a pushchair, a kid who might have been about 7 or 8 walking maybe 5 feet behind her. The older kid had a small rubber ball and was bouncing it on the ground and catching it. He seemed perfectly happy. It wasn't making any noise or bouncing around or anything. It wasn't bothering anyone. He was just bouncing and catching his ball as he walked. The woman, I assume it was his mom, noticed this after a minute, spun around and grabbed him hard by the upper arm, and then shouted right into his face, "If you keep bouncing that fucking ball, I'm going to smash your face in it." Shook him hard once, and then just turned around and walked on with the pushchair. The poor kid just looked so emptied, like he wasn't even allowed this one small pleasure. It doesn't matter how annoying you find it when your kid bounces a ball, that's just never an okay thing to say to your child. This wasn't in a parking lot, it was in a pedestrianized plaza area out front, small in a city supermarket next to a library and other stores. There was no traffic, and it wasn't crowded. I was waiting in line for a ferry in what state? In case you've not done it, there is a big parking lot and everyone waits in their cars till you load up on the ferry. The guy next to me obviously does not know I'm looking at him, and he turns around and smacks the shit out of a crying 2-year-old while his 6 to 7-year-old daughter is watching. He hit him 7 to 8 times in a pure H-style beating. He looks over and notices I'm watching and tries to pretend nothing happened. I get out of my truck and start to head over to the bomb dog cop they have around. As I'm heading over there, he runs up, stops me, and asks me what I think I'm doing. I kept trying to get around him without a confrontation. He kept pushing me, but I was able to sneak by, so he tripped me. I got up, walked into plain view of the officer, and the dude punches me in the back of the head, then spit in my face. The officer saw all of this and came up and put the guy in cuffs. All of this is in view of the small children in his car. So I took a punch and got spat in my face, but in the end the children were taken into protective custody and I pressed full charges. There was another witness to the guy hitting the kid, and they had security footage of the guy assaulting me, so I didn't even have to go to court. An irate mother of a girl in a private school's music program made a big scene in front of the faculty and students because her daughter had not been selected to sing a solo in a school concert. The student had been very clear to the faculty that she didn't want the part, nor was her voice suited for it. Still, her overbearing mother insisted that she audition against her will. As a result, the girl was yanked out of the school she loved by her parents and embarrassed, all because the mother's ego required that her daughter be the shining star in front of others. This like 5-year-old kid emptied a 4-pint bottle of milk all over floor at supermarket where I worked, and her mum just stood there and watched. To add to that, the child managed to place the empty bottle in the center of this now 2 meters wide puddle, and the mum just looked at me and said, "You've got some cleaning up to do." Unbelievably rude. A little while ago in a supermarket in London, a young girl was screaming at the cashier for asking for ID for the large bottle of vodka she was buying. As the cashier continued to ask for ID, the girl opened her coat to reveal a large swollen belly and shouted, "Of course I'm old enough to drink vodka. I'm fucking pregnant." I was driving along my street when this 4 to 6 years old kid rolls out of a driveway on a tricycle. I come to a stop and wait for him to get out of my way, as he seemed to be doing. His mother runs down the driveway and just starts screaming at me rather than get her kid out of the road. Another car comes up behind and without waiting just goes around, clipping the kid's tricycle, knocking him on the ground, and the lady just screams at me even more. She wouldn't stop or get out of the way. I finally just held my horn down till she gathered her kid up and got out of the way. In the waiting room at the doctor's, listened to a father and son converse for 30 minutes. They would ask each other questions about geography, history, the universe in a natural, not interrogatory way. It was clear the father was remarkably knowledgeable and that he enjoyed conversing with his son. It soon became apparent that this was far from their first conversation of this type. The son had an above average understanding of the world and a mature and sharp way of thinking. Listening to them was a serene experience. It put some things into perspective. There are more people like this around me, and no matter the bleak situation in my country or worldwide, it is possible to lead these beautiful, fulfilling lives. What? You wanted the worst example of bad parenting? Everyone else is posting some pretty good examples. When I was a cashier, this mom came in with her son's piggy bank. The kid was with her and must have only been about 6 years old. He wanted to buy a candy bar with his money, but the mom told him no, that his money was going to help support the family. She then proceeded to buy a 6-pack of beer and some cigarettes with the money, while the kid watched. The poor boy had tears in his eyes the whole time. I refused service to her, and the manager ended up ringing her up. She was paying with mostly pennies and nickels, and while she was distracted I saw the boy walk over to the candy rack and wipe the tears from his eyes. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me it had taken him 3 years to save that money, but his mom didn't have a job, so she took it from him. I bought him the candy bar he wanted, and gave him a bunch of quarters for the gumball/toy machines. His mom saw him trying to get one of those sticky hands from the machine, and then took all the quarters he had from him. I'm a teacher. The examples of bad parenting I could give are staggering. The worst examples end up with me calling Child Protective Services. Like the child who talked about naked family time, or the 14-year-old who left school to play, designated driver for drunk parent, or any number of other things. Day-to-day normal bad though is any parent who talks shit in front of their child. I don't care who you're bad-mouthing, don't do it in front of your child. All that comes to school. All of it. My sister was worried that her 7-year-old son wasn't at the level as the other kids and considered holding him back a year. She didn't end up going through with it, but my brother-in-law found this development super funny and kept openly mocking his own son until his own son starting crying his eyes out and needing a hug. I was absolutely horrified that his own father was acting like a schoolyard bully. I was in a department store and this couple was shopping with their 3 kids. The boy child, who looked to be around 8, picked up a hairbrush and smacked his sister, who started crying. The mom said, "Alex, don't do that. That isn't nice." The boy replied, "Fuck you." The mom, still ignoring her crying daughter, says, "Come on Alex, don't say that." To which Alex then hits his mother with the hairbrush. The mom bends down and says, "Alex, that really isn't nice." Alex responds by slapping his mother across the face and saying, "Fuck you." The mom simply says, "Alex, that wasn't necessary," and kept on shopping. The dad, he just watched all of this like it wasn't his problem and eventually just walked away. I went to breakfast with a good friend and a friend of a friend. We pick up the friend of a friend who brings her 3-year-old son along. The kid is crying and making all kinds of noise. The mother responds by telling the kid that I have a gun, and if he doesn't calm down I was going to shoot the key. A couple years ago, I was on a shuttle in Yosemite. A little girl approximately age 10 had this nasty tight cough. Being in the medical field, I was concerned and asked if she had asthma. The father answered in a curt and rather annoyed tone that she was fine. They were doing controlled burns in the park, which was causing my own asthma to act up. The girl was not fine as she clearly was struggling to breathe. I bit my tongue, but to this day, wish I had somehow persuaded the father to get her help. I work in foster care. I can tell you roughly 14, up to 28, horrible stories of parents. The ones that get me the worst are the parents who sell their beautiful 13-year-old daughter for meth, or the mom who laughed at her 8-year-old when he told her that his dad and stepdad were sexually abusing him and all of his siblings. He begs to go home now and all I can say is, you know better than me. Why you live here, bud?